Last night, a Jedi was murdered. The suspect matched your description. I didn't do it!
Thought I had a life with you.
Your destiny.
You know the power of two
Ties you together.
So my I'm at war with myself. It's a losing game. I'm at war with myself. It's a losing game.
Star Wars: The Acolyte.
Welcome, Masters and Padawans, to episode 547 of Full of Sith. It's me, Brian Young, the host of the show, and with me as ever, the redoubtable, the Disney-fied Holly Fry.
Hi, I'm Disney-fied?
I don't know, I just assume you've always recently been to Disney.
That's fair. I will be in Disney in a few days just for a day trip, but, you know.
Yeah,
this is the delight of living a 45-minute flight away.
Yeah, no, I just always assume you've been to Disney.
It's safe.
Recently.
That's a safe assumption.
I mean, I manage to make it once or twice a year, which is actually ridiculous for me because I live in the middle of nowhere, not close to any of the parks. And it's always sort of an accident. It's always like a last minute thing. And it's one of those things where it's just like, I'm really glad I get to go that often. So if I were as close as you were to a park, I would be there a lot more often too. So I don't blame you at all.
Yeah, I mean, like if I lived in, you know, close proximity, if I were a local, I'd probably be there every day. Like, hi, I'm here for my breakfast. But
no, seriously, like when I was a kid, I used to think that like it would be perfect to come on a day when everything was just dead and sitting right in New Orleans Square. Like that was like, I was like, I'll know I've made it when I can go to Disney often enough where I'll just like bring my computer and sit in New Orleans Square. Now it feels like it's too busy to have anywhere in the park that's like quiet enough to sit down and do something like that. But one day maybe I will, just to say I've done it.
That's true. Although I will say this, right now, Walt Disney World is kind of quieter than usual.
Well, maybe it's because they jacked the prices up again.
That's part of it. It's also like record heat, right? Like the last time we were there, Brian and I went, it was pretty recent. It was like a week and a half ago. And we just went for like an overnight, like a quickie. Because the funny thing was I wanted to take him because we were going to do just a day trip. But then he hadn't seen the drone show yet at Disney Springs. And I was like, why don't we just book a hotel and we'll make that an overnight trip? And he was like, great. We were so tired we didn't make it to the drone show. We conked out way before that. But it was so hot. We got to the park. It was a Saturday morning. Like we flew in that morning. We got to the park. It was like 10 a.m. I was like, why do I feel like I am just made of melting? Because, I mean, we live in a hot place. Atlanta's hot. And I looked on my weather app and it said that the temp was almost the same as what it was in Atlanta. And I was like, this doesn't make sense. And then I looked at the real feel and it was like 89 degrees out and the real feel was 105.
Oof.
So, like, no wonder, I mean, in addition to the money issues, like, no wonder people are like, that's okay.
Yeah.
It's pretty intense.
Yeah. So, I wanted to talk to you. I am dying to talk to you about these last two episodes of The Acolyte.
Yes, please. Same. I've been like, I want to talk about these real bad.
Oh, man. So the last time we talked was before everything went to hell.
Well, do you mean on this show or in life?
Both. But yeah, no, I'd already broken my ankle last time.
I mean, even the Mona Lisa's falling apart, baby.
But no, last time we talked was before all hell broke loose on the Acolyte and the Stranger.
Woof.
He really he really
emerged.
Yeah. So we had an episode that was pretty much one long battle
Yes.
where the stranger tore apart pretty much everyone but Saul, May, and Osha, and Basil.
Yes. Praise Greedo. Basil persists.
Like, to the point where, like, I was shocked. Like, my mouth was hanging open. Like, well, and let's get this out of the way. We are going to be talking spoilers. So if you haven't watched The Acolyte,
come back to this later.
Yeah, come back to this later. But, like, my mouth was, like, my jaw was just, it fell open.
Oh, yeah.
When the deaths started racking up, particularly Yord and Jecki.
Well, and especially, like, Jecki, I felt like we got, not telegraphing, but it felt like, ooh, I could see this being where she gets it. Yord's was so fast and so...
brutal?
It was brutal. It was unceremonious. It was so little about... I mean, they reference in the show that the stranger doesn't follow, any kind of rules regarding battle or engagement. But, like, it was so completely just like, you're a piece of trash that's in my way. It was shocking. It was so shocking.
Yeah. No, it was more brutal than the other neck cracking that we've gotten in Star Wars, where in Obi-Wan, where Vader
Right.
breaks that guy's neck. I found this more brutal. Part of it was because, like, I was attached to Yord as a character.
Yeah, that's part of it. But I think even if you took that out of the equation, right,
But-
there's a brutality to it that is really difficult.
Yeah, it was a lot. I watched it with Kingston, and Kingston was just like wide-eyed, just like,
Of
holy
course.
crap. Like, he was not expecting. And Jecki. And I think my favorite moment in the episode, actually, not because I liked it or agree with it or anything, is when the stranger... Are we calling him the stranger now? We've moved on from Chimere?
I mean, I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
I feel like using each name separately kind of...
It feels like Anakin and Vader.
Yes, it represents the duality. Because even, I mean, the way he even code switches within a conversation, like, there's that very chilling to me moment in episode 5 where he's talking to Saul. He has just killed Jecki, I think. He is just had that, was that its name? That, like, weird, creepy thing. And then he just, turns to, was it May? Yeah, to May. And he goes back to that, like, kind of I'm a doofus voice. And he's like, hi. And I was like, whoa! For some reason, that was super creepy to me.
See, for me, it was the one where he goes, where Saul was kind of calling him out on, like, hiding his identity and stuff. And he's like, well, in fairness, I did wear a mask.
Right? He's really good at that code switch between the two identities.
The moment that got me, though, that sort of gutted me, was when Saul was sort of taking him to task for killing Jecki. and he goes, you brought her here.
Oh, man. There is so much of his interaction with Saul that, like, I have 100 questions about. Right? Because he intimates that he knows something about Saul that we don't. And that Saul wants to keep secret, right? He does that thing where Saul asks him, like, what master hides his face from his people? And he's like, you tell me. And I was just like, whoa!
Yeah.
And their whole interaction is full of that.
I don't want to predict too much, because especially this show, like, anything can happen, but I wonder if part of it is that the stranger had something to do with whatever sparked the conflagration at Brendok, and that Master Saul succumbed to some darkness and has been hiding that from Osha, because he was more responsible than he's been letting on.
Right. Yeah, that's essentially something in that ballpark is essentially what I think most of us are kind of thinking. But like beyond that, it's really hard to speculate. It once we get to episode 6, we'll talk about how Saul is not helping matters.
Yeah, no, not at all. But this episode really turned the tables on things, especially when you have that switch between May and Osha.
Yeah.
Where they trade clothes. The stranger takes Osha dressed as May back to his hideout. Saul takes May to his and to his ship, and they get away, and everything is leading to tragedy. I don't know that any of these folks are going to live, and anyone who does live is going to end up having to be joining the dark side.
You would think.
Because like there is that whole like Ki-Adi-Mundi thing that everybody lost their mind about. Right, where it's like they don't think the Sith had been around for a millennium.
Right. And
why would they think that if in episode 6 plays this up a lot, right? Where Soul's trying to call for help, and Vernestra's running after them, and they're trying to find them, and they don't know what's going on, and Saul turns off his homing signal and cuts off the communication. That like Saul is vowing to sort of deal with this himself, and I don't think anybody's going to hear from Saul again.
No, I think the odds are pretty long.
Yeah, and I think that anybody who does survive is going to end up with the stranger, part of that Sith lineage that leads to Palpatine, who is only 30 or 40 years away from being born.
Yeah. There are a couple of things in these 2 episodes in particular. I'm like the one person on Earth, I know I sound very contrarian, who I recognize that this is the case, but the line about the poetry and rhyming is not my favorite. I think I've just heard it too many times. I don't disagree with that it's happening. Anyway, so I'm not going to say that, but it is happening. There are some really interesting parallels in these 2 episodes to pieces of Star Wars we've seen before. One of them being May telling Osha, they've turned you against me, and her making this very emotional, like, you and me, we're back together, everything's going to be great kind of play, which seems insincere when you then see how she behaves, minutes later. But it did strike me as interesting. I'm like, oh yeah, who else have we heard say that? Interesting. And
well,
that
it
whole...
goes back. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say her whole thing of like, please choose me, please, and it's like, well, you're making it seem like she has a choice, but you don't really want her to have a choice.
Yeah. The other thing it goes back to is Mortis, right? This idea of like balance between light and dark, and a master, especially with the way the stranger is trying to like at least espouse that neutrality. It's like the people who are like, Jedi are fine, but I wish they were more horrible and violent. Let's do gray Jedi. It's like, it's a really like inherently flawed philosophy, like right off the bat.
Right.
And I think that that's really where the stranger is kind of coming from a little bit. And it reminds me of that balance between Mortis, and then we're seeing May and Osha sort of as son and daughter, play out those ripples through the Force like we saw there in those episodes. I think Mortis, it's amazing to me how much Mortis feels more and more relevant every time something with the Force, something big happens with the Force in Star Wars happens, that you can go back to Mortis and sort of read those connections and ties back to it.
Oh yeah. I want to ask you a question.
I would love to answer a question for you, Holly.
Because my opinion on the matter continues to change. When do you think Saul knows?
When do I think he knows what?
That it's a May and not Osha.
Oh, I wonder, like, I don't think he waits for Basil to tell him. Okay. I think he suspects it just before then, but not much before.
Interesting.
Especially when you look at like how awkward the hug between them is.
Yes.
Like, I think there's a lot of clues that would tip him off, unless he's just totally, like, willfully ignoring all of the clues that are telling him that it's not her. Or he's trying to show. I think that there's even a chance that he knows the whole time, and he's trying to show her, like,
See, that's where I'm at.
Where he's trying to show her, like, the love and the care that he would give, that he'd given Osha for her whole life, and that the life of the Jedi wasn't so bad.
Yes, because here's where I landed at that, because I hadn't thought about it a whole lot in episode 5, because we didn't have that long with the two of them together. And then in episode 6, I kept being like, does he know? Does he know? And then I went back and rewatched 5 again, and I think he knows the second that she helps him stand up from the ground when they're still in the forest, because there is a weird pause, and I'm like, oh, he just made her. Like, he knows. I could be wrong, but I think.
Well, and he was waiting to zap her until she made a definite move to harm him.
Yeah, that I think you're onto it. I mean, again, this is all speculation. What do we know? But I do think he's it goes back to that thing earlier in the season when he is talking to Osha about it, and he's like, have faith in your sister. Like, I believe we could do this. And I really do think he thinks that he's going to fix it in some way, or at least heal her, or perhaps heal himself by treating her well, in contrast to maybe whatever he did back when they were kids. I think now that's where I land. I think he knows the whole time. Like, I think obviously, the stranger knows the whole time.
Yeah.
But I think maybe both of the masters do at this point.
So I think that there's so much interesting stuff going on in episode 6 that really bears like really deep, close reading of.
Yes.
And there's this idea, like, I really love the idea that there's this sort of yin and yang kind of thing going on where, the big, light side half of that takes that piece of darkness with him, and the big dark half of that takes that piece of lightness, and you see the light and the dark sort of bounce back and forth between each of the scenarios that we have. And you look at the color story and how, like, all of the stuff on that really pleasant island that the stranger brings her to is very nice and pleasant and bright, and Master Saul is trapped in this dark spaceship that loses power and gets even darker. And the contrast between the way he treats her when it's definitive that she's a dark side user and strapping her to a table, and the way the stranger treats Osha when the whole time, like, he gives her his weapon. He's like, try the helmet on. It's cool. Like, we're fine. We're everything's cool here. Like, this is freedom. You're good.
We're buds, man. I got nothing against you.
But also, like, in the costumes too, like Master Saul's costume, like his Jedi robes are dark and foreboding.
Yeah.
And the stranger, like, I thought it was so fascinating, and that I don't know,
dressed
maybe
like a
people think I'm
romantic
crazy.
poet.
Well, but when he goes to the water, he's dressed all in black, and he takes those clothes off, and he goes into the water, sort of like this baptism analogy, you know what I mean? And then emerges and puts on the white. And it's so representative. Like, they're not messing around with the colors they're using on the characters. The same way, you go back to Return of the Jedi, and you look at Luke's costume where he's all shrouded in black until he finally shows that last spark of hope and light, and the flap on the front of his shirt comes open, and there's the white underneath it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
they're telling stories with the color and the costume and the contrast between light and dark and the contrast between the characters and their philosophies in light and dark. And it's such rich storytelling on deep layers that I'm always taken aback every time I hear somebody go like, this show's not good.
I mean, same. Like, okay. I kind of have to chuckle. I don't know if chuckle is even the right thing, but I mean, we've talked ad nauseum about the folks that do not like it, and whatever, that's fine. But what I thought was really, really fascinating, or what I think is really fascinating in how this is playing out, is all the people that were very grouchy about there not being enough white dudes, I guess, and it being woke, whatever that means. If they had hung on, or if they are hanging on, they're kind of getting all the stuff they always said they wanted in new Star Wars, but they've already said they hate it. So I'm like, are you just sitting there secretly liking it, or are you not even getting the benefit of seeing all this cool stuff because you already tapped out? I don't know. It just makes me chuckle.
Yeah, I don't know, because I've definitely seen some people that have been sort of railing against it get to episode 5 and just go, oh, okay, that was cool.
Right.
But that also sort of like is troubling to me in a way where it's like the only thing Star Wars is for them is a vehicle for action.
Right, which is never, I mean, that's never been my jam. Like, I love an action episode now and again. I really enjoyed episode 5, and I thought it was spectacular, though upsetting. And those fights were incredible to watch and mind-blowing. But also, like, that's not all that it is.
I think, well, it's kind of like the story equivalent of, like, George Lucas having that quote from Star Wars The Jedi, or maybe it's not from Star Wars The Jedi, but he says, a special effect is a tool. It's a means of telling a story, and a special effect without a story is a pretty boring thing. And I kind of feel the same way about lightsaber battles. A lightsaber battle is supposed to be representative of the internal struggles of a character and the external struggles of the galaxy. And when it's not representative of those things, what's the point, right? Like, I really love the enthusiasm that people have for making fan films, right? And they do some amazing fight choreography, but that's sort of all the film is. And the thing it's lacking is that connection to character to make it more interesting. And sometimes I wonder if that is just what folks want. Some of these folks, they just want that flashy, cool saber fighting rather than all of the character work that goes to make that meaningful.
Yeah. I mean, the deeper parts are obviously the parts that you really relish. Same, I love them too. So it is, I don't know. I have that moment where people only want the lightsaber fights where I'm like, maybe we aren't actually a fan of the same franchise, because you have a different one in your head than I have.
Yeah, no, it's the same
Which
thing.
is not to be like a gatekeepy thing. I feel like our perceptions are so different. We're not talking about the same thing anymore.
Like, I think there's definitely that strain. We had that strain of fan that were upset about Phantom Menace, where it was just like, and I still hear this today, where people
why is all
like,
the politics talk?
The prequels would have been better if it was just episode 3 was episode 1.
Yeah.
And it's like, why? How? That doesn't tell the story. Like, the whole thing is how, like, the whole story is a myth, an allegory for kids to go, here's how the best of intentions can lead you down to the path of evil, and even someone who is good inherently at heart can go down that path and do horrible things, but that it's never too late to come back from. Now, how does that story get told, and how does that myth get passed on to kids if we start at episode 3?
Right.
And then episode 3 becomes episode 1, and then episode 2 is just like more Vader killing people, and then episode 3 turns into basically the Obi-Wan TV series or something. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
What Like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
You're
And
getting
I
all of
want-
the candy and none of the entree.
Exactly. Because Star Wars means something. Star Wars, from the very beginning, has been designed to teach us something. Stories are supposed to teach us something. Go back to one of my favorite quotes from Roger Ebert was that movies are machines that are designed and built to generate empathy in other people.
Right.
And that's a good thing. Like, we should want to experience stories to learn empathy, to learn how other people live, or to learn lessons, or to appreciate perspectives that weren't our own, and things like that. And that's one of the biggest takeaways I've always taken from Roger Ebert. He was even when I didn't agree with him, he always showed me a way to empathize with either the filmmaker or the story or something in a way I didn't understand before.
You have accidentally segued into the next thing I want to talk about.
Please do it.
Telling stories about love and empathy, because there's an interesting, to me, parallel that's happening in episode 6 where I'm just calling them both masters for lack of better phrasing. Both masters are telling the person they have with them about love and empathy, and they're talking about the same person, but in very different ways, right? The stranger is talking to May about, or not to May, to Osha, about why do you keep attaching yourselves to people who can't love you back the way you want? Like, why do you invest so much in this? And to him, this is like a fault. Like, she's doing it wrong. She should be giving in to something else and like loving. I mean, his implication is like, but maybe I could love you back that way. Whether he means that romantically or not is a matter of discussion. And I feel like the only person on earth who's not like shipping anybody, but that's always been my thing. And at the same time, this is also part of why I think Saul knows it's May from the end of episode 5 on, because he is then talking about how Osha loves Pip and how she loves even droids and how she is so expansive in her heart that she loves everything. And to him, that is not something he's talking about as a fault, but like something that is, kind of beautiful and touching. And I think he's telling May that story as though she is Osha, but to try to convey to her how like this is a person who loves so many things. Of course she could never have stayed in like her one life with you and your mothers. Like she has to love everything in the galaxy in some way, right? I think that's kind of like an interesting dynamic. And perhaps he's also telegraphing to May, like, you don't have to live in a place of hating everything. You can love things.
I think
even
that's something. I think that's something that that's something I had to learn myself, and I think it relates to Star Wars and Star Wars fans too in sort of a meta way, where like there's this. I think it happens in like every person's like adolescence, right? Where they have to weigh the things they love versus the things the people around them love, and that dichotomy between the two, and sometimes the contrast between the two, really helps form them as a person, right? Do I maintain my identity and unabashedly like the things I like, or do I poo-poo it in front of other people because I want to seem cool or fit in or whatever? And I know people like this, that like they're top marks for something. Like my brother, actually, I've got a brother who like he loves Star Trek. He is into Star Trek as I am into Star Wars. That's not true. He is as into Star Trek as he can be into anything. I don't think he's capable of being into anything as much as I am into Star Wars. But like his top marks, when he's just like, it was amazing, his level of it was amazing was, it was fine. Because the people he surrounded himself in his adolescence were so jaded that like that enthusiasm for anything, that love for anything was sort of quashed.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm going to be on the side of people who love the stuff they love recklessly. I mean, I'm pretty honest and open about the things I adore, including droids. Listen,
I didn't say anything.
Pip.
I didn't say anything.
I didn't say you were going to say anything. I don't know what you think I'm telegraphing.
I was just doing that line from Revenge of the Sith about R2.
Oh.
In the elevator.
Yeah.
No one's wanted jokes. I didn't say anything.
No, I wasn't even there. I'm like, I don't, what is he about to say that I'm just slow. Poor Pip. Anyway, that's a different thing. Right. But like, I'm going to invoke another, a completely different film. But there's a great Baz Luhrmann line in Strictly Ballroom where he says one of the characters says a life lived in fear is a life half lived. And I feel that in my bones. And I particularly feel that in terms of the fear of being embarrassed of loving something outwardly and openly. Like I know people that do that too, where they're like, no, I'm into it. And I remember, various points in my life, there have certainly been like people who are like, oh, I wish I could be that free in how I talk about things or whatever. And I'm just like, what do you mean? Are you alive? How do you not?
Yeah.
So I obviously land on that side, but it did really strike me as I was considering that Saul has known the whole time that, like, one, it was very interesting that they're talking about parallel experiences with the world to each of their guests, for lack of a better way to label them. And it just struck me as really, really interesting.
It's interesting that you bring up a Baz Luhrmann film, because it reminds me of a line from a different Baz Luhrmann film that I think in the context of that film he meant in regards to people, but I think it could be easily referred to things too. But in Moulin Rouge, the line that John Leguizamo has as Toulouse-Lautrec about the greatest thing you'll ever know is just the greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return.
Mm-hmm.
And that thing to just be loved, just love things and be loved, and you're going to be much more content. But that actually gets to the core of what Rose Tico says in The Last Jedi, that really encapsulates everything Star Wars is about. That we don't win by fighting the things we hate, we win by saving the things we love. And I think if Star Wars has taught me anything, it's that unabashed love, and that I need to open my heart to the things I love and not feel ashamed about it, or when people say like, oh, you've got these guilty pleasures, and it's like, none of my pleasures are guilty, I'm sorry.
Right. I mean, I
like
have
one
and it's Bravo, but that's different.
But I mean, like, that's probably something, like, the guilt is something you're probably working through with your therapist.
Yeah. The other thing I have on my list to talk about is helmet.
Yeah, that's a really pretty helmet.
It's a really pretty helmet. I love this idea that there is a place where there's cortosis, which has come up in the legend stuff.
Yeah. Well, no, it's come up in the canon too.
Yeah.
Cortosis was a huge plot point in Thrawn Alliances, where the Separatist Alliance was working to mine Cortosis to weave it into droids, battle droids, so that they would be unstoppable against the Jedi. And Anakin Skywalker and Thrawn foiled that plot from their base of operations on Batuu.
Yes. My thing that I was thinking about was my brain just completely wiped itself.
I'm sorry. I love that island, though. And that island in the Legends, there was an island that had Cortosis on it, described exactly like that, in that same sort of Octu kind of feeling. where Darth Plagueis had actually killed Darth Tenebris.
Yes, that is what I was thinking of. The name Tenebris just like flew out of my brain all the way to Ireland,
Unless
where
it's
some people
Figrin
think
Dan.
this is.
Unless it's Figrin Dan, it's not a Bith you care about.
That's not true.
I'm kidding.
I care about all the modal nodes. But yeah, I just think that's really interesting. But there are two things that I want to talk about with the helmet. One is just there are so many parallels in these episodes to other stuff, and one of them is this idea. It's not the same scenario, obviously, but like the stranger giving Osha this helmet to put on, and we see her put it on and we just hear her breath, and he obviously is trying to foster a master apprentice thing. And then we also see, of course, Palpatine put a helmet on Vader, and we just hear his breath, and that is a more forced thing. But I'm like, oh, this is parallel. But here's the real thing I want to talk about. Do you read the kind of highlight synopses that they're putting on StarWars.com?
Sometimes. I haven't
Each
for
episode.
these newest two.
So there's an interesting line in the write-up for this new one that I was like, je m'excuse, and I went back and I rewatched a cajillion times, and I did not see it, and I don't know if I'm just having a problem. But towards the end of this synopsis is the following line, quote, Osha accepts the surprising offer to try on the stranger's cortosis helmet, a sneering piece of sensory deprivation that thrusts her into a future always in motion for one glimmering moment to witness May's next attack. I didn't see any witnessing of anything.
Yeah, me neither. I'm wondering if that was written based on an earlier cut.
That is what I am wondering too. Because it jumped out at me, and I literally was like, I of course ran to I think it was my iPad that was handiest, and like was playing it over and over and rewinding it, and I'm like, am I missing something? Am I missing some piece of audio? Let me put in headphones. Nope. Okay, let me watch it one more time. Okay, let me watch it 7 more times. Like, I don't
Yeah.
I don't think we missed it.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's there.
So yeah, that makes me wonder. That it's just an interesting curiosity that I wanted to make sure I brought up.
Yeah, no, that is very, very interesting. I'm gonna have to pay closer attention to those, because maybe that's probably where the next one will start then. Though I kind of feel like the next episode, as you listen to this, it's gonna be tonight, so you won't have long to wait. But I kind of feel like we're gonna end up on Brendok again.
I think so
16 years in the
too.
past, and we're gonna finally see, because this episode ends with Saul saying like we're gonna have a chat, and obviously the stranger is sort of like alluding to the fact that he knows more about what's going on than he's letting on. I think that's what we're gonna get.
It's also the same director that directed episode 3.
Oof, yeah, no. So that makes total sense, like just from a production standpoint,
Yeah.
where it's like, let's put this one director on these 2 episodes, and that's their jam, and they can shoot them all at once.
Yes.
That is a cost-saving technique.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think for sure there will be more Brendok, whether it's the whole episode or not. We're gonna see some big chunks. I think we have to.
Yeah.
I still don't know what I think Saul is doing.
Right,
because he
Saul
does
knows what
like
Saul is doing.
well, I mean, in terms of like whether or not he is a goodie or a baddie, to oversimplify, but you know, the fact that they're like, don't turn off your transponder, and he's like, goodbye. It makes him look shady as hell. But yeah. I do wonder, right, if he is just thinking that if he stays and the Jedi show up, it means something bad no matter how you slice it, in my opinion. Because I think whether you think he's like, well, I'm going to get out of here before that because they're going to find out my secret and that I'm actually evil. That's one possible read. But even if you take the more, I don't know if you would call it rose-colored read, that he is in fact still on the side of the light, and he is trying to sidestep the Jedi involvement because he feels like he needs to solve this problem himself and, get May on his side so they can both go get Osha and save her and take down the stranger. That means he doesn't trust the other Jedi, which is also a problem.
Yeah, no, it is. I want this conversation to carry on much longer, and I've been waiting for 2 weeks to talk to you about these 2 episodes. But unfortunately, something came up literally 4 seconds before we started recording, and I have a hard out that I got to go take my kid to a thing. So where can people find you, Holly?
I am on Twitter at Surliest Girl and on Instagram at SurlyGirly5. Stuff You Missed in History Class is still at Missed in History everywhere, and Criminalia is #Criminalia. We have a book coming out in October I'm very excited about. We can talk about it when we have more time. How about you?
You can find me at swankmatron.com or at swankmatron across all the social media, and I've got books and stuff too. We should just do an episode where we just talk about our creative stuff, and maybe how Star Wars tied into it. And then we could just talk about all of that. Or not, I don't know. For Full of Sith, you can go to fullofsith.com and listen to the entire back catalog of episodes. Send us an email at holocron@fullofsith.com. And yeah, be sure to rate and review the show wherever it is you listen to it. So unless there's anything else, Holly.
No, I'm just very excited for tonight's episode.
Me too. So with that excitement, for super producer Mike Pilot, for Holly Fry, I'm Bryan Young, and the Force will be with you. Always.
Sir, if you'll not be meeting me, I'll close down for a while.